Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Tonight we have a late night insight on a house that I'm starting to get to know a little bit more, doing some more videos on. This is actually the second video on this house, that I've done in the last couple of weeks. And this is going to be obviously a late night insight. So just a little bit of a quick ramble on a house that doesn't get very much talk in Fragcom, at least that I'm aware of. And this is called Damascena, and it's from the house of Katana. So first of all, I have to say thank you to my good friend Hari for sending me this very generous decant of a very expensive fragrance. So Katanas are notoriously expensive. So for 30 mils, this will set you back $336, okay? And I recently reviewed one from the house called Khan, which was sort of a homage to Genghis Khan, if you will. But actually, this is my favorite Katana fragrance that I've smelled so far, because Oud Damascena is really an oud-centered fragrance. So let's read the little blurb, and I'll tell you a little bit about what I get. This is the second night that I've had a chance to wear it to bed. So obviously, when you just have a couple drops, a few very precious sprays, you have to just kind of, make an initial impression and put your thoughts out there. And that's really what these videos are. If you have a bottle of this and you get more than what I'm going to discuss, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. But if you go to Fragrantica and you pull up this fragrance, the fragrance that it actually gets compared to is my favorite rose of all time, Malik Taif, which I'm still hunting for a bottle of this. One thing I will tell you about this house, Katana, is that even though I think, when you smell the ingredients initially, you're going to put it in the realm of things like Bortnikov and Areej Dores and those kind of artisanal brands, let's call it, the Ensar Ouds. I think that this house has serious potential, but I think that there's still a long way to go, if that makes sense. I don't think that they're on the level of an Areej Dore or an Ensar or a Bortnikov yet, in my personal opinion. Although this is a very good fragrance, all of them seem to just wear very light and very thin. So even though this has some extremely heavy notes, you've got oud, you've got multiple different types of rose, you have real ambergris in here. I just feel like it needs some oomph. It needs, something that's going to make it last a little bit longer on the skin. And I understand natural ingredients maybe don't last that long or whatever compared to some of the synthetics or whatever it may be, but I just feel like this could use maybe like some real musk or something to amp it up a little bit. All of his fragrances that I've smelled so far, I feel this way about. And what's crazy is if you go to Parfumo and you read sort of the one comment on Parfumo, it says 99% of people will hate this. It'll be too much for them. They won't be able to wear it. And I'm in the 1% of people who is the exact opposite. I want more. I want it to give me more. So let's read the little blurb and then we'll kind of talk about what I get from it. So here's what the official Katana website has to say about it. The agarwood and the rose are one and the same. As some perfumers in the Middle East would say, it is indeed a common combination, but we have our secrets to make a beautiful combination. We used an exquisite natural oil of wild-aged oud that comes from Bangladesh, from the Ocularia agalocha tree variety. I have no clue about that particular type of Ocularia tree. I'll leave that sort of detail to the oud distillers. Only the infected parts were distilled, giving birth to an oil that is more than 35 years old. That's a little bit misleading, I think, because, of course, the infected parts were only distilled. That's how you distill oud. You don't distill the non-infected parts. So acting like you're doing something special there is kind of I'm not sure I like that wording. Indeed, this combination of wild oud, rose, essential oil, rose absolute on a concrete tincture of oak moss accentuates its smoky notes. These notes evolve with time. The Turkish Damascena rose is well present at the very first spray, accompanied by the intense oud, giving way to a note of crushed rose petal, which evolves. Nothing better to tie the soul. The perfume brings an extraordinary luxurious sensation between Asia, oud, and Orient, rose, a perfume composed of rich and very characterful ingredients. Oud Damascena is the majestic royal tiger of Bengal, marking its territory in the wild forests of Bangladesh, leaving its indelible mark on its passage. Okay, so that's the official blurb from the brand. So the top notes are damask rose, rose damai, and yuzu. Middle notes of oud bengali, animalic oud, smoke ambergris, and damask rose, with a base of woody smoky notes, rose otto, and damask rose again in the base. So you can see what I was talking about as far as like there's no patchouli, there's no real musk. Even though he mentions oak moss tincture in the note breakdown, there's no oak moss listed. There's no vetiver, there's no cedar wood, or there's no, I just feel like there could be something that maybe makes the fragrance a little bit stronger, if that makes sense. More of a base, more of a base heavy fragrance, maybe some benzoin or tolu balsam or something, some sort of resins, because his fragrances, I really, really love the opening. What's funny is if you read that Parfumo comment I was mentioning earlier, it says that the first opening is like the most challenging part, but the first half hour is actually my favorite part of the fragrance, because what I end up getting is the fragrance itself starts smelling almost like a little bit of a vinegar heavy, moldy wood. You're getting a lot of like the bark smell from the wood, and with a very cheesy facet to the oud, okay? So the oud comes across as heavily fermented, and you get this little bit of a cheesy facet. And what's crazy is the cheesy aspect to this oud brought me back to being a child when my father would take me to the Arabic store, because my father is Arabic. And he would take me to the Arabic store. And I remember there used to be these kind of buckets where they would put these cheeses in. And they were very salty cheeses. I forget all the different types of cheeses, but they had all these different types of cheeses. And inside, the cheeses were like inside of this like water like mixture, and very salty cheeses, right? But whenever you took the cheese out of the water that it was in, it almost had this very specific smell. I don't know if it was a mixture of the bucket that it was in, the water that it sat in, or whatever liquid, the salty type liquid that it sat in. But imagine this very salty Arabic style cheese. Well, maybe not even Arabic style, but it reminds me of this Arabic shop I used to go to as a child that would sell these type of salty cheeses. And it's funny because this type of oud, it's something where I feel like when you're newer to your journey, when you smell this, this is gonna be your reaction 100% of the time. No way anyone likes this. There's no way anyone out there actually likes this. And I've sort of had this conversation with multiple people, but it's coming up over and over again as I test more of these type of fragrances, is the more your nose smells this kind of stuff, as the years go on, it's not something you're just going to smell one day and the next day you wake up and love it, right? It's something that's going to take time. And so as your nose begins to sniff more and more things like this, it literally changes. The way you smell a fragrance changes. The way your brain interprets the smell changes. It's not like you sit up here and you're like, yes, indeed, this oud is magnificent. It's not like that. Like you're in some sort of an art clinic holding a Chardonnay and you're sitting there just talking about how superior you are because you know this artist. No, it's not like that at all. It's just more, your nose just literally just evolves. It changes. The way you smell these notes change over time. And so this type of oud for me, as the years have gone on and as I've smelled more and more and more ouds, this type of oud that I might have said, wow, it's extremely barnyard, or I've heard people say it smells fecal. It doesn't smell fecal to me at all anymore. What I get is this just very fermented quality to the oud, right? And it's slightly resinous, very woody. But for me, it's almost that vinegar-like smell that comes across in this particular oud. The vinegar and that very salty cheese that kind of sets it apart. And I've absolutely grown to love this smell. It's funny because if you go watch my interviews with Russian Adam, he says oud is the very top material in the totem pole. And for a while, I really didn't understand why he says that. But the more oud I've sniffed, the more I understand exactly where he's coming from. because this type of smell just you do not find in modern perfumery. It's something, you know, all of the people complaining about modern perfumery smelling the same, and you know, these houses copying each other, and IFF and Givaudan and Simrise and Maine and Robertet using all of these same essential or captive molecules that smell the same and all this stuff. This is your answer. You know, going to the oud game is your answer. There is nothing you're going to sniff that's going to give you this type of a smell, in except for real natural oud. The black oud, the norlimbinol, the all of the stuff that the you know big designers are using to create an oud accord just cannot come close to this, the real thing. And so just something I thought I would mention. And this is very well done. Like the first half hour when you spray this, if you're an oud head, you will be enraptured. You'll be, you know, you'll be captured by this scent, okay? So the oud here is slightly bitter as well, slightly sour. So it's almost like a bitter, sour, and also pungent like oud. And the thin wearing of the fragrance, this almost thin veil, is really what bothers me about this, because it's almost like, you know, it's almost like my nose is just wanting to pull more. Like I'm wanting to sniff more. And it just gives me, you know how sometimes when you just want to smell more of the fragrance and it just gives a little bit of it to you. And so you sniff harder and it just gives a little bit. So this is a 3-hour dry down, okay? And while it didn't go as, so con on me, the Katana fragrance I reviewed previously went very, very quiet on me, extremely quiet. It was a beautiful rose opening, but it just goes extremely quiet into the dry down. This one's a little bit more tenacious. This has a little bit more of those animalic notes that I like, but it still just wears very sheer, like a thin veneer. You know what I mean? And I really feel like, and I know this guy who is the perfumer, his name is Alp Velliogulari. That's his name, Alp Velliogulari. And it says that he started Katana Parfums in 2021, so just a couple years ago. This was one of his first fragrances. This is a 2021 release. But he began mixing just oils and incense and stuff like that in 2012. So, and I think he's self-taught from my understanding, okay? He's just an entrepreneur, dedicated entrepreneur who is self-taught. And I really feel like that's why I say this house has a lot of potential, because you can tell that the guy is using very high quality materials, but I don't think he is putting everything together in a way where he's maximizing his potential yet, in my personal opinion. I think that the next releases, as this house continues to grow, it'll be very interesting to see how this gentleman, Alp, how he sort of grows as a perfumer, and if his tastes change and if his tastes evolve, because I really feel like that sort of very thin veneer, you know, when I wore Khan that night, his last fragrance, and I wore it to bed and did like a late night insight video, right? After I turned the video off, I sprayed this on Malik Al Taif, and because I said, wow, that is such a beautiful rose, but it just disappears. Malik Al Taif, it was absolutely insane. I sprayed it on, and just the power of it, just the sheer, you know, this was just dominating Khan, right? And the first half an hour of Khan is beautiful, but it just fizzled, you know, just fizzled into the dry down. And I could smell this the next morning, clear as day, just absolutely beautiful profile of Malik Al Taif. And, you know, I really feel like that's where this house needs to go. It needs to either build some sort of a base, or, you know, there needs to be sort of a recognition of, I would say, taking these to the next level, because he has a great sort of foundation. Now he needs to take it to the next level, in my personal opinion. But I'm a nobody. I'm just a fragrance connoisseur. I'm just someone who loves scent, and I just get on here and ramble for a bit, turn the video off, post it, and that's it. And so I won't be buying this, obviously, but it is very, very good. I would say, you know, if you've got your top tier artisanal houses up here, This is right below it. It really is just a little bit below it. It has a chance to join the ranks of the Areej Dores, but he has some work to do, in my opinion. And so the way that this fragrance sort of develops, right? So it starts off with a little bit of that yuzu. And the yuzu is like smelling like sweet and sour, right? It's like a combo of sweet and sour. And it sort of blends with the oud. The oud really sort of comes on from the very beginning. So when you look at that note listing that I read to you, you'll notice in the top that it says damask rose, rose de mai, and yuzu. So if you think this is opening like a rose fragrance, you're wrong. It opens straight up like an oud. A lot of oud right from the very beginning. And what ends up happening is that oud, like I mentioned, starts off very vinegary, moldy, woody, cheesy, okay? And animalic, very fermented oud. And with that starts to come through some smoke. Now the smoke that starts to come through feels like it almost has a charcoal-like effect, right? And so imagine skanky oud sitting on top of like a metal rack on a grill, okay? And the metal rack on a grill is not just any grill, but it's a grill at like an apartment complex, or maybe a grill at like a park. And the reason I say apartment complex or park is because imagine a grill where it's been used many a times, right? Many a people have used this damn grill. Some of them have not even taken care of it after they've used it, right? They put their charcoal in, they use it, they walk away. They don't even bother to clean it. And the reason I say that is there is this sort of ashy, burnt charcoal, smoky smell in the background with the oud. So imagine you put a piece of oud on top of a dirty sort of grill, metal rack on the grill, and the walls of the grill are lined with like old charcoal dust and stuff like that, right? The walls are just coated with this old charcoal, and because folks didn't bother to clean it, but it sort of adds this flavor to the oud, if that makes sense. That's my best descriptor of the smoke in this fragrance. And even though the rose is listed right in the top, that Damascena, or it's also known as damask rose, right? So that damask rose is very gentle from the very beginning, very soft, very gentle. That's one of the characteristics of damask rose. Damask rose is just a gentle, soft rose, but it also can come across as fruity. And so what's interesting is when you add the yuzu to this very soft rose, when the rose does start to come through, that yuzu almost imparts like this sweet and sour fruitiness on top of the rose, okay? So when you get whiffs of it, it's so soft. The rose is extremely soft. Now, 3 hours in, the rose is a little bit more prominent, but still, now this fragrance is becoming softer and softer and softer. Just what was happening with Khan. Same issue, really. I love the opening. Love it. If money was no issue and you could just pay the $336 and I could spray this every couple hours, I would do it 100%. I love the opening of Oud Damascena. It's beautiful. It's really as an oud lover, you would love this if you love oud, right? But the rose is sort of very soft, and there's little fruity notes that start to come through, almost like a fleshy nectarine that I get sometimes. And it's paired with rose de mai, right? And rose de mai is supposed to add just a little bit more power to the rose Damascena, because it's a very soft rose. And so it's supposed to add a little bit more power, but even with that rose de mai note added in there, the rose is very soft and really takes a back seat. This is an oud smoke. Now they say ambergris. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of that sort of sparkly profile to it, especially into the dry down. But it just becomes so soft. It's not something it's not something I would, it's not like a note that I would point to as an example of a well-used ambergris note, personally. It may be here, but it's just not, it doesn't seem to come together properly. And that's, again, what I was getting back to. I think he just needs to kind of work on the execution of the scents and how everything comes together, personally. Many people, make the argument that these type of houses rely on the materials. And to be quite honest, I disagree with that assessment many a times, because I've smelled some amazing compositions from folks like Russian Adam and Ensar and Bortnikov, but this house especially, this Katana house, really does feel like he's really relying on the materials, and that there just needs to be, maybe he needs just somebody who has put perfumes together, to maybe just refine it a little bit, give a little bit more technique to the fragrance, if that makes sense. Because I love what I'm smelling, but it just kind of seems to fall apart. Honestly, it does. And it's a shame because it's a beautiful first couple hours. And does it get soft? I mean, if you like the softer fragrances into the dry down, then I think you would really like this house. For me, I like that powerful. I've got the Russian Atom disease, right? I want the extra oud, the extra musk, the extra ambergris, all of that stuff. I want the power, and I don't get that from this house of Katana. So it's a house that I think, again, has some serious potential, but he needs to kind of put it all together for me to really get on board. But I like what I'm smelling so far, and it's a house that I would definitely urge you to sample if you like these type of perfumes, these artisanal houses, as I'm calling them. If you're tired of the 27th oud fragrance that Dior did this year, I'm just exaggerating, I'm making that up, but you get the idea, right? If you're tired of that stuff and you want to smell artisanal perfumery, Katana can be on your list to sample, but don't blind buy. Definite sample if you get a chance. These are not cheap. They're pretty expensive price per mil, especially for what you're getting. I think if you're going to spend this much money, I would rather give my money to Russian Atom or something like that. My personal opinion, but it is good, and I think it's worth I think it's worth a sniff for the oud heads. So that's just sort of my take on Oud Damascena. If you guys have any experience with it, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Love to smell more from this house. He has a lot of stuff out there. He's got a lot of fragrances that obviously it's impossible to smell everything. He's got one called Fleur de Oud I've never smelled. He's got Santal Seeger I've never smelled. So there's a bunch of stuff out there. Noisette de Assis, never smelled. So, it's definitely a house that maybe you'll see more on the channel one of these days. But so far, the first two, they have some good, but they also have some bad. Definitely wouldn't be a house that I would go spend this kind of money on if I was dropping this kind of my own coin on, my opinion. But anyways, let me know what you think of the House of Katana. If you smelled Oud Damascena, I'd love to know your thoughts. So thanks for watching. Cheers, guys, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.